let's talk about the Celtics for a second, because when Drew gets traded, I think the immediate reaction is, all right, he's on the move. Which contender can go get him? And I'm going to give away this week's Old Man of the Three podcast guest. But I was in Boston on Friday. We sat down with Joe Mazzulla, had an awesome conversation with him, and I feel cheated. 2 days too early, because I didn't get to ask him about Drew Holiday. I didn't get to ask him about Drew Holiday. We certainly touched on the Dame trade with him, but to me, what makes this? Let's just start with what makes this, I think, so special. To me, you have arguably the two best point of attack defenders on the perimeter in the NBA. I'm that high on Derek White, and I have been for probably a year. He was fantastic last season. He was fantastic in the playoffs. He's different, I think, in some ways than Drew. Where Drew, there's more physicality. There's a little more ability to just like blow up pick and rolls, blow up dribble handoffs. Derek is longer. He's taller. He's bigger. So they're different, but they're both excellent at what they do. And look, I don't want to go through all the numbers, but Hoops Empire put up a advanced metric tweet yesterday with these two guys, and in pretty much every single individual defensive metric for guards, they were upper 90th percentile in the NBA in every single metric. So, we could talk about the loss of Rob Williams, and again, that probably is important because we're going to talk a little bit about the center rotation. But let's start there. Defensively, what these two guys are going to be able to do in terms of blowing up things. And of course, you look ahead to a potential playoff matchup, like it's Dame and the Bucks, right? You've got two guys to throw at him and hopefully disrupt a little bit of his rhythm in the pick and roll.
I'm just really excited to watch both of those two slither across screens. Like, these are two, you mentioned the point of attack defense. They are two of the best screen navigators in the sport. And so just trying to get into your offense, period. And Drew is a guy that doesn't mind going, 3/4 court full pressure or just flat out full pressure and just disrupting the timing of your offense there. The fact that you can trade those two off, like, you can't just go with like a fake. You can't go pistol and then switch those two and think you're going to get something easy out of that. You switch Drew off, here's Derek White. You switch Derek White off, here's Drew Holiday. And I think getting Drew Holiday, one, he's really good, so he helps you. But in light of trading away Marcus Smart, like, one of the questions I had was, how versatile is this group going to be? Because I think Marcus Smart helped unlock how viable of a switching team this was, just because you can stash him on a 3 or a 4 and not feel bad about it or feel that you need to send a whole bunch of extra help. And Derek White is switchable, but not to the same degree. Getting Drew back in the building means you can maintain some of that. And so I think there's a little bit more versatility for Boston, in addition to, again, Drew is just really good at what he does. Derek White, all defense caliber season last year. Could have made the first team, in my opinion. So they are absolutely going to blow some things up. Steve, what say you?
Well, I was going to say, they're going to cause some chaos defensively. My gut reaction was, okay, you went from all in on Porzingis defensively to locked in on Porzingis defensively, and that gave me like a little bit of a headache for like 5 to 10 minutes. But I thought about it. Getting Drew, having Derek White may be the biggest thing that helps Porzingis defensively. Because if you're going to keep him in a drop, those two can navigate the heck out of handoffs, pick and roll, everything. That's going to lessen the pressure. So he may be able to replicate some of what we saw from Brook Lopez. Obviously, not apples to apples. But I think that's going to be tough. If you're looking at a playoff spectrum, if you have a Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford lineup, how much switching can you do? How disruptive can we be? How much fun are you going to have dealing with that? So I just think they were able to take what they had to a degree and add Porzingis. And I think, honestly, the offense with Drew is where my mind really starts to like enjoy this deal.
Interesting. I hadn't really put that together, but that is an interesting way to look at it, right? You essentially replicated what this group has had for the last 2 years by replacing Marcus Smart with Drew, and then you added Porzingis to it. I don't want to give away too much of our interview with Joe Mazzulla, but two things really stuck out about the conversation and then the trade happens, and I go back to these two things. The first one is he talked a lot about defensively not having a curveball. And I think in some ways, Drew, he doesn't eliminate the need for a curveball, but he certainly puts less pressure on you needing a curveball, right? Whether that's double teams, I don't know, go into a zone. Not the curveball has always been with this team. We're going to switch. We're going to switch really well. Well, on the ball, they weren't as good last year when they switched. So their defense got broke down. So I think in some ways it eliminates the curveball. And then the second part is, Joe talked a lot about the two big lineup with Porzingis and Horford. And I think now you have lineup optionality, even night to night. Like I know that a lot of coaches will want to start the same five all the time, but maybe they do that in the regular season. But in a playoff series, depending on matchups, you can start small and go Tatum and Brown and White and Holiday and a big. You can start big and play the two big lineups, and maybe Derek White comes off the bench. So in some ways, they're even, to me on paper at least, they're even better in terms of optionality than they were before. But of course, they lose some depth. And I wanted to get your thoughts on, both your guys' thoughts on that. It's likely Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser, and Luke Cornett that sort of fill out this rotation. Maybe it's some other young guys. It is important to note they can still trade 2 future firsts. They can still trade 3 swaps. They have 8 second-round picks to trade, and they have a TPE. So Brad Stevens will have some options at the trade deadline to add another rotation player.
I guess my eyes immediately goes to the big room. Like, I think the Luke Cornett minutes were fun. Like, Steve and I joked about, like, the very long contest. We'll call him that. But I do think there's a little bit of viability for him in a drop. And offensively, he can keep things moving. Good screener. At least gave the illusion of a guy that could pop out and knock down shots as well. And
that's mean.
It's the regular season
That's
maintenance.
mean. That's the most backhanded compliment I've ever. Like, don't even you didn't even try to hide that.
I'm just saying, like, this is what he
I think the nicer thing to say would be like, at times he's capable of stepping out and knocking down a shot. At times, the illusion of someone. Jesus, man.
My apologies to Luke Cornett and anyone listening. But no, like, I think in terms of regular season maintenance, I'm curious to see what kind of runway he gets. If they are going to keep him in a drop, then again, having Drew and Derek White up top is going to help him in that regard. I do wonder if they have like a pure vertical threat. Like, I think they'll miss that from Rob. Obviously, he did more than that, being able to handle the pass as well. But like, I wonder if they do look to add someone like that in the actual center room, because they do have some bench like forwards that can also screen and roll. Like, I look at O'Shea Brissett, someone that can bring some energy offensively, can crash that way. But if they could add something in that aspect in the center room, I think I'd be interested by that. Peyton Pritchard getting consistent minutes could be fun.
I think it's fun.
Well, I thought it was just an endorsement of Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser, and like, hey, let's give you guys a cleaner pathway to fill in, and especially during the regular season, it's going to be good. What their rotation looks like in the playoffs and who else emerges is going to be interesting. You mentioned Luke Cornett, but I'm thinking like, okay, can Lamar Stevens now have more of an impact? Could O'Shea Brissett have more of an impact? What's the versatility as far as staggering and mixing and matching? But I think that's the one thing, because they have so much talent, you can have staggered lineups and you can still have talent on there. So now, okay, big, you need to do this job. Wing, you need to do this job. Peyton Pritchard, go do what you do. My questions probably don't raise until the playoffs, where it's like, okay, how many of these guys do you trust to give this 5-minute spell and this 5-minute spell here? Like, that's where I'm like, are we going to get there? But that's what the regular season's for. Let's find out what we need. And if we need to add something, as JJ mentioned, we still have some capital. Let's figure that out.
As we talk about the playoffs, and it's a long way off for sure. You get into the potential matchups with the Bucks, or who knows what happens with the Sixers, but they still have Joel Embiid and he's still the MVP, right? You certainly sort of look at the one-on-one matchups, and overall, I thought Horford did a great job last year on Embiid in single coverage. He's shown at times, he can guard Giannis for stretches in single coverage. So I'm not as concerned about that, to be honest with you. And it's interesting because to draw a parallel to USA Basketball and sort of how undersized they were and where defensive rebounding really was an issue, I don't have that concern with the Celtics. I don't. They were number 1 in the league in defensive rebounding percentage, all right? Their top 2 guys were Tatum and Brown in defensive rebounds. Horford was 4th. Rob Williams was 3rd. Porzingis averaged more defensive rebounds than Rob did last year. So that the defensive rebounding part of it, where I think you're saying you're losing Rob Williams, I'm not as concerned. They rely so much on Tatum and Brown to get those balls. Like I think they're going to be really good there again. And Derek White, of course, Drew as well, their ability to chase down long rebounds. Historically, those guys have been good at that. So that's not a concern. I do think as we get deeper and deeper into the season, some of these sort of matchups that we sort of look forward to, whether that's like a Jokic, right, in a regular season game, an Anthony Davis in a regular season game, some of the bigger teams, Denver and the Lakers come to mind immediately, where you're sort of thinking about potential finals matchups if it does end up being the Celtics, right? Those are the interesting matchups that I'm going to sort of monitor because those two teams in particular are really big positionally and have the ability to sort of wear down opponents throughout a playoff series. Of course, different conferences, I know, and nobody's saying the Celtics are, the odds on, actually, they're tied with the Bucks in terms of being the favorites for a championship, but that's a whole nother segment. So that's kind of what I'm interested. Your thoughts on that? Just the overall size in the Eastern Conference and whether or not you have concerns about that with the Celtics, because I don't at all, actually.
My only concern is you're kind of locked in with certain matchups because let's say it's Embiid in particular. You have what, 1 or 2 options now? If it's Giannis, who can handle that matchup? So for me, it's just like, okay, what are the answers in these individual matchups? Like, could Jimmy Butler cycle through everyone? And now it's an issue. Like, that's where my mind is like, okay, is it just Al Horford? Is it still Al Horford? Is it always Al Horford? Is that just the bit?
Al Horford's going to be the next Tom Brady. He's just going to be guarding number 1 front court options in the playoffs till 2030. That's Al. That's what he does.